Okay, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the best television podcast you've ever listened to in your life. It's called Betty Draper Sucks. My name is Cameron. On my left side is David.
How are
He is
you?
from Australia.
G'day.
Shut up, don't say anything yet.
Sorry.
On my right side is Ben. He's from California. He's 38 years old, and he's homeless. And we've got him on the show tonight. Introduce yourself, Ben. Say a couple words.
Yeah, I'm Ben Hagee. I live in California and I'm homeless.
And you're 38 years old.
Thanks for showing up.
No problem.
We have very many things to discuss on today's show. We have episode 5 of Mad Men. We have a brand new HBO show called Girls. Very interesting show that we're going to talk about. We have episode 3, or is it 4? I think it's episode 3 of Game of Thrones.
3, yeah, 3.
Yeah, and, we'll probably talk about Zed. No, we won't talk about Zed.
Well,
But,
I feel like the 26th letter of the alphabet is fully covered now, and we don't need to discuss it anymore.
All
For
right,
my
so
money, I'm with Bacon here.
Yeah, well, you would be, because you're a Amerifag, same as him.
okay, so I'm gonna go with Ben. Ben, what show would you like to discuss first? What's on your mind?
Oh, I see, the new guy gets all the special privileges.
Well, I'm a better friend with him than I am with you, and he's smarter than you and everything. So I'm gonna let him go ahead. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, there's a little thematic link between Game of Thrones and Mad Men, so we should start with either Girls or Game of Thrones.
Let's start with Girls. Zorbo, David, what did you think of the pilot?
I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was really entertaining, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. The main character, Hannah, also wrote the woman who played her also wrote and directed and created the whole thing. And she's
She's written like the first 5 episodes and directed the first 2. So it's obviously going to be very strongly driven by the star of the cast. She's also the woman who wrote Tiny Furniture, the independent film that won some admiration and some awards, and that's pretty much why she's got the show.
It's very people draw an immediate comparison to Louis because of that kind of like auteur perspective.
Yeah, it's real similar to Louis in the way that it views New York. I think it's got this real sort of unique attitude towards the city, which the Louis has got as well.
I think whenever we have, a comedian looking at like a city, we're bound to see, kind of an interesting point of view.
Yeah, it's got this real sort of cosmopolitan, but also down to earth, gritty way of portraying it, and I think that shows that the characters know the city more than a lot of us do. I mean, obviously more than I do, but more.
Well, they do live there.
Yeah, more than other shows like Friends
But
or whatever.
it also
New York, and it doesn't really portray the way the city is as well as they do.
Well, I think it also has an air of that they haven't really lived there for that long, nor have they lived in big cities for that long, and they're just kind of, they're still trying to figure out, what their roles are there and how the hell they can, make themselves known and make their impact in a city so huge.
I agree with that.
Plus, being able to afford it as well, so it was very expensive.
Yeah, that was a big element of the pilot.
Yeah, that was something that I always hated about the show Friends, is how all these people with no jobs and one works at a cafe. They're all living in really nice, they're living in really nice, Manhattan apartments, and they all have really nice clothing, and they're all wealthy, high class people for some reason. But Kramer never really had a job either. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, Kramer was kind of it was kind of implied that he sort of inherited some money and he was just really lucky and got all this money just from doing no work. But I feel
what I really enjoyed is how humanistic all the acting is so far.
I found the dialogue to be pretty realistic. Just the way that the characters interact with each other, and they kind of just base jealousy and the way everyone just kind of hates each other a little bit, and that
especially girls that are in their early 20s.
And I thought that was portrayed pretty well in the writing and in the performances and in general just the dialogue.
Definitely. The lead, Lena Dunham, obviously writer, director, and whatnot. She definitely, like, especially has a very, very good, like, hold on her character. She's charismatic, and yet, like, relatively unlikable, but relatable. And I think that's kind of like the spirit of the show, really. But
So, what do
Yeah,
you guys
she's
who do you guys
vulnerable
think
as well.
was who do you guys think was the strongest comedic actor, or had the strongest funniest performance in the first episode, and who do you think was maybe weak, and then they're gonna really have to get it going.
I don't know if we're going to see him again, but I think her boss at the writing company she was working at was made me laugh more than anybody else.
I loved that scene. Yeah, that was great.
I think in terms of like awkward comedy, Adam Driver, who played Adam, her like weird boyfriend,
He was great.
yeah, he was really good.
Yeah, I think the one sort of ditzy girl, the one that's from Mad Men that you're such a big fan of, I think she's was kind of underused, but I think she was still pretty funny as well.
Well, the pilot did take a little bit trying, introduce Hannah basically, and their plight. As much as I hated her on Mad Men, I actually kind of enjoyed it, which was surprising. So, looking forward to her not annoying the shit out of me. She's not, some stupid little sly, almost Pete Campbell in a woman's body that she is.
She kind of brought in one of the like more, I don't know, I guess like meta elements of the show,
With
which is
the Sex and the City stuff.
yeah, how much it relates to
Yeah.
that show, and it's sort of like a response to that show.
Yeah, it's like a inverted sort of hipster parody slash
Well,
tribute
think
to Sex and
HBO
the City.
I think HBO wants to know that, or at least show that as much as women were influenced and almost empowered by Sex and the City, that they want to show there's another side of it. Not everybody is just looking for love, and these girls are actually trying to find themselves and find their places, and that's obviously there's more to it than the Sex and the City.
Yeah.
Plus, in that show, everything was very like kind of yuppie and non-realistic, and here in
Yeah,
Girls,
it was almost like Friends on HBO with tits. There's Friends again, second reference already.
Sex and the City on HBO?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, I never watched it, so I don't know.
yeah, Aussie.
Yeah, no, I didn't watch it because I'm Australian. I just didn't watch it because I'm not a 20-year-old girl.
I've never seen really an episode of it either. Just Jimmy.
I've seen one or
And
two
yet
episodes.
Yet you know so much about the way it portrays its characters.
I
It's
do.
a really big cultural thing over here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I forget.
Yeah, it's just like your stupid shows that you like that make you act the dumb way that you do. That's what we have. All right, I think we covered the girls' pilot sufficiently.
Well, one other
Unless Ben
quick
Hagee has
thing.
something else. Okay, go ahead.
I was wondering how we feel about. I mean, reading a lot of like responses on the internet. A lot of people seem really, really divided with the show because of the worldview of the show. How it is kind of entrenched in like the post-spoiled children generation trying to find their voice in an economy that doesn't really have a place for them.
Well, the Tiny Furniture movie was kind of criticized too for having a pretty narrow worldview and a narrow voice. But, it is only one episode, and
I don't think you can criticize a show for having a narrow worldview if it's the worldview of the person that wrote it. If they're expressing, I mean, you write what you know, and if you're expressing what you know and you're doing it in a way that it makes sense to you and it's realistic in terms of your life, then how can you criticize someone for that? That's
and don't
art.
forget
That's what it is.
Don't forget, they are girls, and society hates girls. Men hate girls. They don't want to see them succeed. This is, it's very, you don't want to think about
Both
it, but it's
in the
true.
show and the show itself.
No, they're girls. People don't think girls are funny for some reason. They don't think they're funny.
No,
But,
there's so many less stand-up comedians that are girls, and so many less lead characters in comedies that are girls.
they're still fighting that, and maybe this show can, maybe this can get them going along with Leslie Knope.
Then
That
again,
show comes back on in 3 days.
yeah, I'm excited for that.
All right, you guys, you gonna keep going on the show, Ben?
No, I was just gonna like tie up. People, you were talking about it being, maybe another funny voice, but ironically, people have called the show unfunny as well.
Well, it did spend half of the episode not really doing anything.
Yeah, I think it's a
And
little too early to tell whether it'll
it's one
be.
episode. It's a pilot. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's got to introduce its characters before it can.
It's not a slapstick shit. You know, you're gonna derive the comedy from the situations the characters involve themselves in. It's gonna be deeper and it's gonna be better. Hopefully, that's the kind of impression I got.
Yeah, me too.
I had never seen Lena Dunham direct before, and she did pretty well. I'll throw that out there. But
Yeah, I think she was, and she's the way she looks as well. She's kind of right for that kind of. She's got kind of this cute look, but she's also kind of homely, and it works well for the character, and yeah.
and she's not afraid to use, the negative parts of who she is.
Well, she almost like humiliated her character. You know, she humiliated her character a couple times already. So we're hopefully, we're gonna see that stretch out a little bit more, and she's not her gonna be her own worst enemy like Tony Soprano.
Yeah.
At any rate, there's a lot of potential here, and I really like the pilot. So
Same.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, I think we've sufficiently covered girls. Probably longer than either of us thought we would. How about we go to Ben Hagee's favorite book and show of all time, A Song of Ice and Fire, and the show.
Your
Game
favorite show of all time?
It's not my favorite show.
It's not. His favorite show is Mad Men because he's cool.
I mean, it's good, but
shut up, Zorbo. Ben Hagee, what did you think of last night's episode and the central conflicts of the characters?
Definitely the best of the seasons.
Agreed.
So far, yeah. I thought the acting of the children, though we haven't seen Joffrey in a while, but Maisie
that's one
Williams.
thing this episode was missing. Joffrey again is slapped in the face.
I mean, you'll have plenty of YouTube videos that immortalize those moments for you.
Sansa in this episode was particularly heartbreaking, and it was funny to see that her kind of bitchy demeanor that she carried on all the way through season 1.
Yeah, she's
is really
defense mechanism.
Yeah, it's really only there to defend herself, and
when you're in a pit of vipers, what are you going to do but attack them? Not that she does. She's so afraid and vulnerable and frightened. I mean, I think in a way she's. I see a lot of people say, I can't sympathize with Sansa because if I were there, I would lash out. I would try to make things better, but that's idiotic.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Get your head cut off.
Yeah, you really can't. You're really powerless in that situation, and I feel like the actress portrays that sort of powerlessness. She's powerless, but she tries to sort of go the opposite and try to portray that she's still got power, that she's still a lady, but she can't. She's completely stuck.
I think she has tremendous courage. The character does, and I think. Cersei,
a lesser character couldn't have put up with any of this. So.
I think Cersei takes a pleasant delight in the plight of this child, and that's pretty disturbing to see.
Well, it's relatively similar to Cersei's own problems when she was forced into a marriage with Robert Baratheon. So you would think that Cersei might see.
You know a little bit more about the background. Is that the case? Was she forced in by her father to marry him because he was going to be the king?
Yeah, so. it was a pact to make the Lannister house more powerful. But
she did say it in the episode, Dave. If you were paying attention, that she didn't want Tyrion to sell off her daughter like she was sold off to Robert. So obviously you didn't pay attention.
I did. I was just checking because he's read the book.
No, yeah, and there's a little more there. And she had the great monologue back in season 1 where she explained how she made herself get to a point, kind of like with Sansa and Joffrey, where she really, looked forward to marrying Robert, but then
there was a time
got crushed.
Yeah, she said there was a time where she felt something for him, but he didn't feel anything for her because he's Robert and he was a dick.
On the note of the child actors, if we turn to Maisie Williams, she was great. I've always been a little bit more skeptical on her than most people. But last night, in her scene with Yoren, she used her face and her eyes really, really effectively, and she did a great, great job.
I mean, I was always confident in her acting ability, but, a lot of people I thought, just kind of really, really, really into her for reasons I didn't exactly see. But she's obviously very talented, and the character's great. But last night, that little trick she pulled at the end was brilliant, and I'm happy to see the character do those kind of things.
I think what makes everyone so enamored by her and by the character of Arya is the all the scenes that she has in season 1 with the guy that does the sword training. I think that the scenes
that guy ruled.
Yeah, the scenes that those two had together were so well done, and the dialogue was so great, and the direction was so much fun that I think everyone associated Arya with being a character that's got so much more joy of life than anyone else in the show has, and I think that's why she's so appealing to people.
Sorry, I just want to say one thing quickly. Speaking of that scene, those scenes with Syrio, I was pretty pleased with the show that they didn't show him getting his head cut off. That they, they showed him taking on those soldiers pretty well, and
with a wooden sword.
You knew he was going to die, but they didn't have to show it, which I was happy that they didn't.
Well, It kind of brings me to the next point too. It was like that in the book as well. He had an off-screen death, and for the most part, they've adhered to that on the show. And there's this really stupid fan theory, in my opinion, stupid that
he's still alive or something.
Yeah, but I think it's idiotic. But
yeah, it's quite obvious he's not still alive. How would he live through that? If he was going to live through that, they would show it, wouldn't they? I don't think that the show would stoop to those lows and have him show up somewhere, and I don't think that the book, which I haven't read, or the show would do that. It seems too typical, too dumb,
too soap opera-y,
too CBS.
Yeah, too Lost. We're gonna kill characters and bring them back reincarnated.
Yeah, Well, I'll stop before I say too much.
Yeah, we're done. We're done with Lost.
I have another question about the the Song of Ice and Fire books. You know how all these characters, especially the Starks, keep saying how winter is coming, and they're your nights of summer and all this sort of stuff. What does that actually mean? Is are they just speaking metaphorically, or is like this the way the seasons work in this?
Well, the seasons last
completely different.
Last longer than normally, because it is a fantasy story. I mean, I'm going to let Ben expound on this, but I know that the summer that they're currently in has lasted many years, and they obviously think that if there's a long summer, there's going to be an even longer winter. So, Ben, you can go ahead and continue from there.
Well, yeah, it is a little bit of both the metaphor and the very physical and literal. You have the longer seasons, like Cameron was talking about. And if you remember in the first episode, a white raven came to the council. They didn't explain this in the show very well yet, but you know how there are like maesters, like Maester Aemon at the Wall, and Lewin at Winterfell, the old guy who is with Bran all the time.
The blind guy at the Wall you're talking about?
Yeah, the blind man. He's a maester as well. And Crescent, he's the one who died drinking the wine with the Red Priestess. They are all maesters, and they are trained at a kind of like a special citadel. They just learn many, many things. They're healers. They study really all sorts of things. And every time like a season has passed, the citadel sends out a white raven to all of the major keeps and castles to let them know, officially, that season is over. So I think right now, at the beginning of Clash of Kings, spring has begun, and we're moving into fall.
I think that they also obviously use the metaphor winter is coming as some sort of, dreadful time, which obviously is going to result in has resulted in a huge war that it's going to happen in the downfall definitely. From that. Yeah.
With Catelyn's comment about Renly's people, I mean, it's just, a big kind of reflexive thing. Like, my son's fighting a war. You are playing at war.
She's not this tactful, is she?
No, not at all. But I mean, you can't blame her for being fed up, yeah.
Yeah.
I like Renly as a king, by the way. He's much more personable with his people, and that's probably why he has 100,000 men at his back.
Well, that and he married Marjorie.
Yeah, that are uniting their houses.
Is that is she related to Catelyn's family?
She's a Tyrell.
No, Westeros is divided into 7 kingdoms, basically, and the Tyrells own Highgarden, which is one of the, provinces, right. And they're, a very, very, prominent kind of family.
Speaking of her wife, she seems a little bit more politically savvy than you would expect, and from some people that have read the books have said that Renly's overt homosexuality wasn't really in the book; it was more implied, and you weren't expecting his wife to be like that. But she's obviously well aware that he's gay, and she needs to get that baby.
Two instances where it's like very clear that people did not read the book closely enough were not catching that Renly was gay and not catching that Stannis and Melisandre definitely do, elope numerous times.
From what I heard, that it was, it wasn't completely obvious, but that it was that was implied. It wasn't exactly said as much. But I guess I would trust your opinion more than yours. Obviously, I haven't read the book, so I won't speak for it.
Because of the POV, organization of the books, there's a lot that is more implied, whereas it can be so directly shown on the screen.
So there's no scene or there's no paragraph in the books about like slurp noises?
No.
Okay, just making sure.
I have one question. Kind of comes from my roommate. It's for you guys. Obviously, I know the story. I have a different point of view, but I wonder, how do you guys feel about kind of the scope? Is it too big? Or is there too much going on? Too many characters to service?
I'll take this one first, and Dave, you can go ahead and hit it after. I think the scope is obviously huge, and I think you can, the terminology and just everything that's happening, the different houses, all the land that it covers, it can become a little bogged down, it can become a little confusing. But it is only really focusing on like 4 or 5 really main characters, and I think that it switches between the storylines very well, and I think that it covers them all pretty equally.
Yeah, I think I agree. The main thing that I think about the show is the scope. It's big, but it's also small because the scope. The characters are all going through the same thing, so you kind of there's a flow which you can feel. Fuck me, I got to clear my throat. Hang on.
While you're clearing your throat, I'm just going to expand on your thought that really the show, the scope would seem a lot smaller if there was no Daenerys. I feel, with the way they feel, kind of almost on a different planet, and all their struggles are pretty much a different struggle than everyone else.
Kind of the challenge of her character, really. And I was worrying about that going into the series, that a lot of people might feel she's so disconnected that, why is she even a part of the story right now? But
well, obviously, there's so many books, and she's a character in the show, so obviously the people in the show thinks that she's going to be important enough, and we're going to have to let her character play out, and it's going to pay off.
I think the fact that she was absent in this episode, this most recent episode, made the whole thing feel a lot more connected and a lot more grounded, and everything was kind of flowing together pretty well. And with the previous episode, where it had everything that was happening in this episode, it also had Stannis and it also had Daenerys as well. I think that made it.
Yeah, it was flying around a lot. Yeah,
made it feel more cluttered. And I think that
the Dothraki have been kind of going through the same struggle for a little while too.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I think that the show it deals with the scope well when it doesn't show too much at once. Like it's okay that there are as many characters and settings and everything that as there are, but I think that if it tries to deal with all of them at the same time, then it gets cluttered. Yeah, so I think in like this latest episode where it was just showing a handful of them, it's much more well executed.
So you're happier with that than and you're okay with not seeing Jon for 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that if we had to see the characters each episode, that wouldn't be very organic and natural.
It would take forever to get anything done.
Yeah, and we don't need to see Rob every episode. We don't need to see Jon every episode. Obviously, they're important characters, but the story needs to be told. It's a wide story, and there's going to be certain things that are cut, and there's certain things that are corners that are going to be jumped around.
And for the most part, the producers have done a really, really good job this season with all of the expedition they've had. They've sped so much up. Like right now, certain characters are at like the 500-page mark, and we're in episode 3. They've really, really, really sped a lot up, and I've been surprised, like repeatedly, how well a lot of that has worked.
Well, there is a lot of material, and there's only 10 episodes, and there's 10 hours per season to fit how many pages into one, and I think that they've done a pretty good job of keeping the pace interesting for something that could obviously be very drawn out.
Before, I know it's kind of going on long, but the one character I wanted to talk about with you guys was Theon, because he was a bit of an outlier in season one. A lot of people didn't really understand like what he was, and now he's getting,
I didn't.
I didn't even know what his name was until until the wildlings tried to take Bran.
I didn't know what his name was until season 2.
Yeah, and I mean there was a scene in season one late where not that late, but the scene where Tyrion comes back to Winterfell to give Bran the saddle or whatever. He meets Theon, and he kind of like gives the exposition there about him being a ward of and whatnot. But it was hard to catch if you didn't already know it, and it was a little clunky. But how do you guys feel about him this season now that he has become a pretty primary force?
I'll take this one first.
Take it all first, why don't you?
Hey, I think that he's a character desperately in need of love and acceptance, and
he's very Shakespearean in my opinion.
Yeah. He obviously is, allying with his father and his sister because he feels that's where he belongs. He wants to prove himself as an actual warrior. He wants to prove himself that he's Ironborn. And that whole baptismal scene was kind of, I thought it was a really good scene. It was kind of creepy, almost, with his dad watching on, not ashamed, but also not really objecting. And
I think the scene
Yeah,
where
go
he
ahead.
wrote the letter and then burnt it, I think that was probably the most powerful scene of the whole episode. Like, it's a turning point for the character and it's a turning point for the show as well.
I'd agree that that was a nice scene. I don't exactly really see the need to it for even to have been there, because I thought that it was quite obvious that his allegiances had changed. But I don't really see it that's useless. But I didn't really see it in the same way that you had. I don't think. Aggie?
They did a lot more in this series than they did in the book. Regarding like Theon's kind of like brotherly link with Rob, and I think that was like a way to sort of like in the books he's honestly a lot like shittier a character, like shittier a dude. But he's still, very kind of like his conflict is like tragic and real, but a lot of people really hate him, book readers. But
I think he's pretty sympathetic in the show so far, because you haven't seen him. You've seen him so long, without really anybody for him to hold on to. He's with the Starks for so long. He wasn't even their child. Now he's back with his dad, who gave him away. Who really doesn't seem to want him. He's given him one ship as opposed to 30 ships his sister's getting. So I think he went back with his dad so he can win their favor, and if he does win somebody's favor, he wants it to be the favor of his blood.
And if you go back and watch season one, knowing who he is, pretty much every scene he's in, there's an element that the writers did really well with, of like his sort of character flaw, like the need to prove himself so, constantly. That is sort of like the beginning of his downfall, his tragic flaw, and that's part of why he feels so like Shakespearean to me.
And honestly, I cannot wait to rewatch the first 2 seasons once season 2 ends, because there's so much that I'm going to catch again, and it's going to be really great. I'm really excited to watch it again.
Yeah.
Before we leave, the one other thing I wanted to touch on, like one complaint I've had that I don't think would be echoed by you guys, maybe having not read the books, but I'm curious. I think they've kind of missed the spirit of like the world being a kingdom and there being small folk and peasants and whatnot, and they kind of touch on that in the whorehouse, but they don't do it super effectively in the books. In Tyrion's arc, there's a lot about him trying to please the small folk in the kingdom to a degree.
He did say that line to
He had the
Cersei
line about the
yeah.
peasants and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think that's been kind of a missing element. There's ramifications for all of these like stupid games that the Highborn are playing. There's big time ramifications for these smaller people, and we haven't seen a lot of that yet.
No,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Zorba. You can take that one.
That's right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've actually felt about the show from day one. It's like, okay, every single character in the show is from the upper class. Like, where's the trickle down? Who does the shit roll downhill onto?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought about that too much, to be honest, but now that you mention it, it is a show that, like Zorbo said, very, very centric based on people who are in power or are vying for power. I mean, it is called a Game of Thrones, so it does make sense. But I don't know in the book, like you said, how many relevant characters and how much relevant time could be spent on these people that really don't have too much significance to the world.
I mean, very few of the POVs, if any, I can't really think right now, are from anyone lowborn or anything like that. But there's often sort of like, um, characters that pop up, like especially in John's storyline and Arya's, because she interacts with Night's Watch recruits as well, and things like that, where the voice of the small folk and kind of the troubles of the small folk are relevant. But I don't know. I think I might have spoke too soon because we all know we're heading toward a war, and in the series, I'm not spoiling anything to say, book 4 is kind of like after the main force of the war, and it like very much deals with how much the war fucked up the kingdom, and so I'm still hopeful we'll see a lot of that come through in the future.
Hey, I'm not done speaking about Game of Thrones yet. I don't think we've actually touched on what happened in the actual episode too much more than we hit on Theon and a couple other things. I wanted to
Marjorie and Brienne.
I wanted to specifically mention Tyrion's brilliant scene about intentionally deceiving the members of the council and finding out which one would rat him out. It was very satisfying to see that play out.
Yeah, I think that the way that the show dealt with that scene, like he was talking to one and then it would cut and then it would cut back and then he was talking to the other one, it was something that the show had never done before, and it felt kind of a little bit out of place, but it was so well done that it didn't bother me.
It was very well edited.
Yeah, the way that the transition from the first, when he was first talking to I forget who it was he went to first. I think it was the old man. It was the old man first.
Oh, no,
yeah,
it was
Varys he went to secondly. The way it went to it was almost like a dream or something. But obviously, you could see what he was doing when he said he was going to do different things with different people. And I really enjoyed the proposal that he'd given to Littlefinger about freeing Jaime, which I do know. I won't spoil that, but I do know something about Jaime anyway. But it was fun to see that. Tyrion is so aware of Littlefinger's things that can get him going, and obviously Catelyn is one of those.
They're doing a great job showing Tyrion's kind of power plays in court, and they've done really well with that. Like, that was something again that took more time in the books that they've really kind of sped up really effectively, and kind of
I've enjoyed to see that the smallest man of stature in the show seems to have the biggest political presence in the show, as far as intelligence and just a natural aptitude for it.
Men think it resides.
Yeah, that was more of a threat than a than anything from Varys.
How do we feel about that riddle? I think really, if ever there is a moment where a character speaks the theme of the entire series, it is probably right there.
Yeah. That's because they used that in the trailer for season 2. So
I've really enjoyed Varys in this season, and towards the end of last season with his scenes with Ned in the dungeons. I thought those scenes were really great, and I think that
Hill is really, really, really good.
Yeah, and I really enjoy his shit in this season. And speaking of the casting in the Shadow, it's funny how much like Renly embodies that, and that Tyrion has to live up to it.
Like, I think even you said to a degree, like getting back to Renly, because we have 2 new characters there anyway, but that if you were to throw up for a king, bad phrasing, anyway, you would probably pick Renly. So ultimately, power for the common people resides with the most charismatic man.
Yeah, they don't care who the best strategist is, and they don't care about Tyrion's little negotiations with members of his council and other people he can sell girls off to. Obviously, he has to show something to the actual common people if he's going to be respected and seen that he has power, even though he does. He needs to cast that shadow too.
It's funny to me how how little fallback there's been from like Renly's like gay scenes in this season compared to in the first, where people went nuts. But
I have a question for you, Ben. Obviously, I haven't read the books. What the hell is Renly even king of right now?
he's not king of anything. He is basically, he claims himself to be a king because he thinks his older brother Stannis would be a terrible king.
Yeah.
And that people won't like him, and that he has, more political clout. He's been at court, he's been on the council, he, counseled Robert, where Stannis was up at Dragonstone doing whatever. He has
But
people that like him. So
where is he though? Physically, where is he?
right now he is. I can't remember if he's in Highgarden or in the Stormlands. I have a great map that you can put in the description for this podcast so people can look at it. But it shows the division of these 7 kingdoms, and right now Renly is pretty much, to my mind, in the bottom of the Stormlands, which is right beside Highgarden, and he's just, kind of amassing his army and playing around with them.
No, there's just one thing that I want to say about the power in the show and who should win. I mean, like obviously there's 5 different people vying for the throne, and who I think should win and who deserves to win are 2 different people, and I think most people will think the same about that, and I think that's kind of the idea of the show, is that it's not necessarily who deserves a position, but it's who earns a position. It's kind of even in a system where it's not elected who becomes king. It kind of is, when it comes down to it.
Well, it's whoever wants it takes it. Obviously, Robert was, he was an usurper or usurper. Sorry, and
I've got Jimmy's.
There's somebody who has claim to the throne, be it Renly or Stannis or Joffrey. It like you said, it doesn't exactly matter who is actually in succession. It's the person who takes it, and the person who has it will have it. And there's who's got the most swords behind him is going to be the king.
Yeah, that's kind of like again, bringing us back to Varys' riddle. Power resides wherever men believe it resides. Whoever wants to take the throne will get the throne. That's how we have people like Dany. I'm the rightful heir to the throne. I should have this throne. I mean, she has no more claim really than anyone else.
Well, that was more of her brother than anything. But obviously.
Now that you're here, I can ask. I asked this last week, and we obviously neither of us knew. Are women allowed to rule? Is she allowed to take the throne?
Sure. And it's not, typical. We can kind of talk about the women a teeny bit more, because they're in a very odd place in the series.
But Cersei is actually in charge as the queen regent, because Joffrey is still kind of viewed as too young. But he may have ultimate power, but Cersei actually is making most of the decisions right now. And I guess if there was a situation in which it was most appropriate, then a woman would be able to rule.
Yeah, it's irregular, but I mean, if she had the biggest army and the most, clout and came in and took the throne, she would have the throne. So.
Okay, you guys want to go to Mad Men now?
Yeah,
sure.
My segue was I wanted to think about Pete Campbell, who, is a big part of the Mad Men episode, through the lens a little bit of comparing him to Joffrey and Theon, because he's very similar to both in ways, I think.
I forget what character was it you mentioned in Game of Thrones, and I wanted to have a good segue like that. Somebody who wants power, deserves power, but deserves recognition and power and gets it somewhat, but also doesn't get as much as they should because they're slimy and they're sneaky, and they're not very personable. Nobody really likes them.
Possibly Littlefinger, but
I think that might have been who it was. Actually think it was Littlefinger, actually. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, Joffrey's insane. He's impetulant and awful, but in the same way that Pete kind of grew up not knowing how to be happy, I I think Joffrey might be similar, and I'm not saying we should view Joffrey as sympathetic because he's not, but whereas Pete is. But in terms of like their upbringing, I can see them being. Put it this way: I can see Pete being, 15 years old or whatever, and crying and whining and demanding this and that, and being just a snob.
Yeah, for sure. Pete's a character that has changed a lot over the series in terms of his position, but he's never really changed from season one, not wanting Peggy to be a copywriter and always wanting more, and he's never his ambition has never changed at all, which is kind of respectable, but it's also kind of obnoxious at the same time.
Speaking of your comparisons of Joffrey to Pete, don't forget that the scene in this episode when they go to the whorehouse, and the whore is sitting there acting out fantasies for him to try to see which one she would like. He was ultimately turned on by the one where he was the king.
Yeah.
So obviously that is a not something that you should just not pay attention to. Those two characters are aligned in those kind of ways, obviously.
This episode, I feel, more than any other episode of the whole series, had such great economy of lines. The way that the lines were so well delivered, so well written, and had so much meaning to them was just it was just so well done. Like, I've never seen writing that that proficient in TV, I don't think, anywhere before.
Something I wanted to touch on, sorry Ben, is that this is the lightest Dawn season by far, I think. And this might be another one of the reasons that Ben thinks that this season has been a lot less subtle. Is because Don, there's already his character is almost completely fully developed, but it really has seemed like a Don light season. I don't know if I'm wrong on that, but it just seems like it's been focusing like almost more on Pete and Lane and what's her name, Joan.
Yeah, Joan. Yeah, it's been a pretty Joan heavy season so far. After season 4, she was kind of she wasn't in season 4 as much.
Yeah, I did want to touch on the subtle thing. The season has had the good and the bad for lack of subtlety for me. The good being this episode where
I
nothing.
feel like this episode was some of the most subtle.
Yeah, I didn't think this episode was especially subtle, but it wasn't a problem. And the point of comparison for me was the previous episode, Mystery Date, where there was so much about, the Cinderella story and the serial killer and, the Mystery Date commercial. And it was all, really laid out. And Don's, dream/hallucination, where the leg was poking out from under the bed with one shoe on and all of that. It was all very, very, the word I used, I think, talking to Cameron was writerly.
Writerly.
Kind of hitting you in the face with, ha ha ha, look at all these coy little things we did throughout the episode. And it felt like a lot of the things characters were saying and doing were there to serve the writerly conceit more than, something else. And I felt that it was the same with this episode, but it was much, much, much better done. It was, if we look at the ending, for example, with the Ken story monologue overlaying, with
Very
Beethoven's
important.
Ninth Symphony. Yeah, it was great, but I don't think it was remotely subtle. And I feel the same with the scene with Don repairing the sink, and really any of the scenes where Pete basically failed.
I think last week's episode was more visually subtle than this week's, but I think the dialogue in this week's episode had more subtlety to it than last week's episode. I think the way that lines were delivered and the way that they were written, with sort of every line by every character had sort of 3-4 different meanings to different, the people that they were talking to versus their own internal struggles. I think that the dialogue that was delivered was so well done. I just couldn't believe how many layers there were to each line. And one of my favorite bits that I don't know if you guys remember how, because it was really kind of it was just in a couple of little facial tics, but at the dinner at the Campbell house, when they were talking about who did the crime, and Don corrects them by saying that the last name was Whitman, and then his eye flicker. That was so good.
Yeah, that was really well done. Speaking of the dinner table scene with what's his name,
Because Megan doesn't know
Kenny.
about that yet, does she?
No, she knows about him. Remember?
She does.
Yeah, she called him Dick Whitman in the first episode. Nobody loves Dick Whitman, but I do. Or
Yeah, she
people love Don
does.
Draper or whatever. Yeah, she knows.
Oh, okay. All right. It's been a
But
while ago.
like I said, yeah, the that scene, the entire scene, which I thought was a really well done scene. Anyway, I thought there was a central theme in the episode of all the male characters getting emasculated in some way, and it happened to Kenny's, obviously, his embarrassment about writing, and Pete's sink not getting fixed by him, but instead by Don. The girls are really impressed by it, and it turned Megan on for some reason. You had Pete getting turned down by the attractive teenage girl, and in favor of a younger, more obviously handsome kid, basically. And then obviously Lane beating the shit out of Pete in the office, and Lane getting emasculated by Joan, and she obviously doesn't want to do anything with that frog. And
Roger getting his
Go ahead.
Roger getting sort of verbally abused by Lane as well.
And that, and Don being expected or being assumed that he's gay at the whorehouse. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty central theme. What did you think, Ben?
I agree, and I think it kind of goes back. Sorry, I had to cough. It goes back to the one of the really most glaring central themes of the show is like being American, the pursuit of happiness, and it's such like a fundamental human conflict that we see play out amongst all of the characters, and we pretty much come away with the idea that no one is happy and no one ever will be happy, which sounds really cynical, but
Let me cut in for a second, then you can go back. You said that the pursuit of the American dream and being happy, they all have it. And, they're all still wildly unhappy. So, obviously, the central theme of the show is that the American dream is bullshit. Go ahead.
yeah.
They don't all have it. I mean, I don't think Lane has it. I don't think Joan has it.
What do you mean Lane doesn't have the American dream? He's got a wife. He's got his name on the door. He's successful. He's respected. He's got it. He's got children. He doesn't. He maybe has the British dream, but he's here. And people like that, you would expect someone like that to be happy.
Yeah, I don't think he's respected. I don't think he's respected at all.
By nobody?
Yeah.
Well, by most people, especially in the office.
With Pete, the arc was like especially clear tonight. If we go back to what I was saying earlier about how we can assume, based on his relationship with his parents and whatnot, that he never really learned, how to be happy. So he spends so much time trying to figure it out. He clearly sets up these like obtuse goals, trying to imitate what he sees in other people that might make them happy or might be like representative of happiness, but then they don't work out for him, or he gets them and he wants more and more and more because they're not fulfilling, and he'll come away more unhappy than he was before.
And Trudy alluded to that in the opening episode of the season with when he was talking about work. And what did she say exactly? Like sacrifice. It's like the sacrifice of what's that word? Ambition. About coming home late and all that. Like she seems to be supportive of his overworking and his pursuits for those kind of office those kind of I can't talk. Those kind of accomplishments in the office that he so desperately needs.
No, I agree. I want to cut to the direction really quickly, because I really, really, really enjoy whenever John Slattery gets behind the camera. I think he has a really good feel for the show and framing, and his direction is really fluid and kind of mysterious and very, very confident. And it really kind of like sells whatever it is. He really gets good performances from the actors too, I feel.
Not that that's particularly difficult with how good the actors are in this show.
True.
One of the things that I enjoyed the most about this episode was during the fight scene in the conference room, how Roger, Bert, and Don just stand there. They just want to watch it happen. They just want to watch Pete get his ass kicked by Lane. That it kind of shows the dynamic that these people have, like their business colleagues, and they're all on the board, and they're all supposed to be sort of a team working together to make this company better. But when it comes down to it, they're men that want to see a lesser man
Well,
taken down.
yeah, they're all competing with each other, and with the kind of pride that you can really only earn on your own. And Rogers obviously is the big part of him this season is his role diminishing, and Lane and Pete almost wanting to be somebody else, and not really being able to do it. And I'm not so sure that that Cooper and Don really wanted to see the fight as much as they were just kind of, there's nothing you can really do in that situation. But it did seem like Roger wanted to see it, obviously.
Getting back to what Zorba was saying too about the writing being so good, I think that scene was another example of like the levity that has been all over this season. It's been very, very funny. I mean, I've been one to say since the premiere that once Archer left TV, Mad Men is the funniest show on TV right now.
Oh, I don't know if I agree with that. Not with Parks and Rec and Community and being on TV.
Well, it's definitely better than Community this season.
There's merit in the fact that the idea that Mad Men's funny, but I don't think that it's the funniest.
Well, I think there's more humor to be derived from the situations, like Ben said. I wouldn't exactly call it the funniest show on TV. I think it's the funniest show that isn't exactly advertised as a funny show, because that's obviously that wouldn't make too much sense. But
it's
that's
obviously a drama first and foremost, but the writing has been very funny throughout, I thought.
Yeah, I've laughed several times in the season, and especially with Roger's lines in the last episode. Those were very well done, very well delivered, and the way his humor is brought across, and the way that it's acted is incredibly authentic, and you wouldn't even think that he's a character. Or an actor, I mean.
Yeah, he rules.
You wouldn't even think that he was a guy who wanted to get pissed on in Sex and the City.
Was he in that?
Yeah, he asked the Foot, whatever her name is, Sarah Michelle Gellar, or whatever her faggot name is. Whatever, he asked her to pee on him, Karen. And that's he asked her to pee on him. And that's how he was known for so long.
He's also in 30 Rock once as well.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, he was.
No, he wasn't.
What do you know?
if we, I mean, I think this season, getting back to Cameron talking about it being Dawn light, it very much is. And I think a lot of that's because we have gotten to a point where Dawn, for now, is reasonably... not happy, but content. Yeah,
I was going to say content.
Yeah, and I mean, so we've kind of reached, like, a point where we can let him lie low while all these other characters are reveling in their own self-discovery and unhappiness. And I wonder if people like Pete are going to, if we're ever going to see him find, any source of contentment, or if he'll, continue spiraling out.
Well, I mean, look at that scene in the car with Don and Pete when Pete's really drunk, and Don's just like, Pete's chastising him for being a ladies' man and ruining his first marriage and all this other stuff, and Don basically told him, not to ruin his marriage, and that he was basically a fool to do it, and so it's, Pete's obviously not in the same frame of mind that Don is right now, and. Speaking of the episodes being Don Light, I think that it's ultimately really great because you're going to have all this character development in the season of everybody else, and then when Don's conflict comes back, which it, obviously most likely will because it's Don Draper, it's just going to give that much more weight and probably that much more emotion and that much more just everything to the scenes that will most likely follow, in my opinion.
I think that Joan is going to be one of the characters now that, like you say, Don's kind of gone the back burner a little bit. I think I hope that for the rest of the season that Joan becomes, or at least remains as prominent as she has been, because I love her character and I love watching her develop. because she's just as a person, she's just so sort of clued up with how people are and how to behave. Like the one scene in this episode where Lane makes the mistake of kissing her, and she just gets up and opens the door and sits back down again. Like there's nothing she could have done any better. That was just such a perfect reaction to the situation.
Yeah, I thought that scene was acted incredibly well. Those two have a really good on-screen chemistry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, everyone's unhappy, and Cameron, earlier you said the American dream is bullshit, and it is for these characters because it's so unfulfilling.
Well, it is to them specifically, and not to us, but it is to them, because they've reached a point in their lives where all of them are successful. They're all basically rich. Besides, well, you would assume that Pete's got a lot of money now because he's got a house. So you would assume that he's making a decent amount, probably as much as Don was making at the start of the series, or close to it. They've all got their things, that people who don't have them want so desperately. But actually, the people that don't have them are usually happier.
Yeah.
Because they actually, they have something to work for,
it's the pursuit
and what
that makes you happy.
Once you've actually attained it, you kind of lose that sense of self-worth. You kind of lose, or not self-worth, but you lose your purpose. You don't really know what to go for next. And for a guy like Pete, he wants to, one up. He wants to, show everyone how great he is. He wants to keep signing accounts. He wants, to continue to prove to everybody how important he is. And, Don's obviously past that. But he still has, a lot of the same motivations that Pete has.
I think one thing about this episode that pissed me off more than anything else is that we're never going to get to see Don Draper and the rest of the creative team at Sterling Cooper Draper Price advertise the Jaguar E-Type. It's the saddest moment of the whole season so far for me.
Yeah, well, as an American, I'm very appreciative that Matthew Weiner would not let the best American of all time, Don Draper, advertise a foreign car. I would have probably stopped watching the show if he had to do that. So I applaud that decision, to be honest.
But there is no better car, and there would be no better person to advertise it. It would have been such a good combo.
Speaking of humorous lines in Mad Men and in this episode in general, I thought the funniest line in the episode was Lane blurting out that the Jaguar guy had gum in his pubis, especially in that accent, and
So
how
very
enraged
British.
he was.
Everyone
was,
else just laughing. Like, just leave it in. Forget it.
It was great too because it was greatly acted too because you laugh and all the other characters laugh and Lane's pissed off, so you kind of feel like you're in the room. You kind of feel like you're there.
Yeah.
And that kind of humor is what Mad Men does really well, I think, is the kind of humor that doesn't make the audience like it brings the audience into the world really well, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Quick question for Dave. Watching very American shows like this or The Wire, though The Wire has many, British actors, but
no, it doesn't.
Anyway, I wonder. I don't know. I wonder. Do you think you? I don't know how to phrase this. Like, watch them any differently? Yeah, not even connect, but just sort of. What do you take away from them? Being about a society that you really aren't much a part of.
Well, I feel like the themes that they cover are so universal that it's not really important. Well, that they're not directly relatable to me, but in the settings and all that, and the way that people talk and the accents and the language and all that sort of stuff. But I also feel like for the rest of the Western world that's not America, America's always had this kind of glittering sort of thing to sort of not to aspire to, but it's kind of been something that everyone's kind of thought, oh, America, for at least as long as I've been alive.
Well, it is, yeah.
Maybe the generation before me as well. It's kind of everyone's just kind of thought of America as this kind of it's the biggest it's the largest English population in the world. It's got the most money. Well, maybe not anymore, but it's got the most power globally. It's kind of the representative of the Western world.
Yeah, we do live in a society in the world at large that is very, very highly represented by America. And, it is cinema, the most popular cinema, obviously comes from America, and television shows and movies, obviously like that, music. And the world,
Culture.
yeah, the world, the culture, the music, everything that is consumed, the most of the stuff that is consumed is produced here. So it is a culture that is very almost it is worldwide. So it doesn't have I think that a British show would be a lot more difficult for Americans to get than a
No, I
American
agree.
show would for other countries to get.
That's right, because we experience so much more of American culture than vice versa.
Which is sad, because in the schools here they don't teach you about anything else really except for America. And the only really thing you hear about other countries is if you talk about the world wars. And when I went to school, when we talked about other countries, it was the Spanish Inquisition and all those other types of deals.
Another thing that's that attracts people like me from non-American English-speaking countries is that America's kind of a mirror for ourselves. Like, it's developed, it's us if we were in a different situation. Like, it's developed from us in a different environment, and it sort of gives us a better idea of what we are as people, because it portrays the development of us as a society if it had taken a different route. Like, it's almost looking at like it's looking through a glass darkly, if I can quote a stupid line from a stupid book.
Through the Looking Glass?
Yeah.
Like what's that from?
Oh, I can't remember.
Wizard of Oz? I don't remember.
No.
Yeah. No, not Wizard of Oz. Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland. That's what it was. Damn it, I knew. It was either that or the Wizard of Oz.
It's not originally from that, but it's in that, I think, yeah.
Well, Through the Looking Glass was the title of an Alice in Wonderland adventure.
See, Dave? See?
Yeah, the line I was thinking of was actually from the Bible, which is kind of developed from, and then Lewis Carroll used it in Alice in Wonderland.
We don't talk about the Bible on this show.
Well, yeah, I think with a show like Mad Men too, where it is, happiness is a bit more universal than a show like The Wire or The Sopranos, which I can see how those regionally and for other reasons could be a bit more of a turnoff to non-Americans, though they seem to have done really well despite.
I think Mad Men has more wide appeal than The Sopranos would have, honestly. The Sopranos is really much more of an American show. I mean, obviously it's got characters that are Italian, but it portrays urban life much grittier than,
in a way,
than
I
Mad Men
think
does.
Sopranos is even more American than The Wire.
I would definitely say so too, because that's the type of America that you think of when you think of America. Yeah. You don't necessarily think of inner cities and drugs and all that other stuff that The Wire portrays so well.
The themes in The Wire are so much more human and universal, and the themes in Sopranos are much more American.
Yeah, though Sopranos does basically ultimately argue that people never change, but.
Well, so does The Wire, obviously. So
yeah, I think that just about wraps it up today. I want to thank our special guest Ben for joining us. Thank you, Ben.
No problem.
And we may be having him on again later. We may not, but you'll have to stay tuned.
I would rather have Ben Hagee on than Dave. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, we can't always get what we want.
No, thank you for having me. I don't know if I'll be able to do it next week or when again, but I'd be happy to come back.
And we'd be happy to have you back. But for now, it's good night from him.
Before we cut out real quick, I just want to say that I do think that Ben was a very valuable addition to the podcast and kind of helped us stay on track, which was a big goal of mine for this episode. And we didn't skip around. We started with one show, we went to the next show, and went to the next show. And that's going to be a lot easier for the people who are listening to it, who don't have to skip around for spoilers. We don't even need to put timestamps, really. We can just say, Girls stopped here, Game of Thrones stopped here, and Mad Men stopped here, obviously, at the end of the episode. So I think the addition of Ben, and maybe us becoming more experienced in it, has really made the show more listenable, and I'm much more excited about it than I was last week, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm looking forward to where we go from here.
Anyway, we'll see you later. Go ahead and listen to John Choi. It's a brilliant song, and we'll talk to you in a week.
Yep. Goodbye.